All I wanted was a star. It wasn't so much a star, it was actually technically a sticker. And I was in second grade, and my second grade teacher would put gold star stickers on every test that you aced, every spelling test that you crushed, every math worksheet that you turned in. If you did your work, you got a star sticker. And I wanted a gold star sticker. As I started out second grade, I was laser focused on earning those things. And it wasn't just about doing well academically. Actually, that was way down the list for me. It was what the gold star said about me to all of my fellow classmates. In second grade, I wanted to send a message to the rest of the students to be on the lookout for Popovits. He not only got stars, but he was a star. I was a little extra even back then. I bring that up because today we're continuing a teaching series where we are taking a look at the underside of the iceberg. We're taking a look at the motivations and the needs that we all carry with us that shape our life above the surface. And our goal is to apply the truth of God's love in Jesus Christ to all the things that lie beneath, so that we might be healthier, safer, more integrated people who are being transformed in profound ways by God's love. And we started this series by talking about those who, on the underside of the iceberg, have a deep need to be needed. And today we continue by talking about those of us who have a deep need to be successful. Or more specifically, a need to be seen as successful. We're talking about those people who, on the underside of the iceberg, there is a hunger, there is a desire to achieve and to be found as approved. That's what we're talking about. Do you know anybody like that who seems to have a deep need to achieve and to earn approval and to be seen as successful? I do too, every time I look in the mirror each and every morning. Now, as we start, we need to recognize the blessings that people who have this motivation underneath the surface bring to the world, the way in which they show up on the surface of life and bless the world around us. And people who are driven by success, they do bless the world in lots of different ways. These are the people that typically, they prove what's possible in this life. They're highly productive. They get more done in a day than most people do in a week. They also tend to be somewhat inspiring. They're able to accomplish a lot of things and inspire others to do the same. They typically can draw other things out of people that maybe they wouldn't have attempted or tried or accomplished otherwise. They tend to inspire a good deal of admiration in others. And then not only that, but they tend to show up looking good and getting along with other people. You know, I know that this would mean a lot to those who are driven by a need to be seen as successful. So let's just quickly give it up. A round of applause for all those overachievers that we know. Can you do that? Yeah. I'll speak on behalf of all of us. Thank you for that. There are a lot of blessings that the success-oriented people bring to this world. But we have to be fair. Let's talk about the baggage that we bring with us. Let's talk about the shadow side of those who have this need to achieve and be seen as successful. And there is a decent amount of baggage. You see, what the person who needs to achieve is ultimately after is not the achievement in and of itself, it's the approval in the eyes of others that comes with it. It's the affirmation that others will offer. And I'll tell you this, approval and affirmation are class 1 narcotics. They are strong drugs. They give those who seek them a profound high, but come also with a very deep withdrawal. And for people who are hungry to be seen as successful and to be known as someone who gets a lot out of life and accomplishes everything that there is to be accomplished, when they are seeking after the approval and the affirmation, they can get kind of desperate. And there's this temptation that emerges in the lives of all those who carry this underneath the surface. And the temptation is to compromise your character. To say, you know what, I'm just going to do whatever it takes to get the win. I'm willing to do whatever it takes to get the affirmation, the approval, to be seen as accomplished. This temptation to compromise manifests itself in a handful of ways. I jotted down some examples. There is a temptation to compromise relationships. That's what we heard in the song that Mickey just offered us. You say to yourself, well, I can spend time with the kids later. I really need to close just one more deal. A temptation to compromise their integrity. Yeah, this move is questionable. It's really a gray area, but it gets me the win. Or the temptation to compromise the truth. Yes, I embellished the story, but it made me look good in the eyes of people that are important, and besides, it was hilarious. Everybody laughed, and laughter's the best medicine. Think of me as a doctor. There's a temptation to compromise their humility. People with this underneath the surface are constantly thinking, how am I doing? How's this make me look? Constantly. They're tempted to compromise intimacy. We are great chameleons. We know how to show up in any room, just about any room, and be seen as affable and likable. We know how to hit the mark in whatever room we show up in, whatever group we're a part of. But that often comes at the expense of our own intimacy. We're good at playing the part in every room that we walk into, but often people don't know who we actually are. You feel as though no one sees you, no one knows the real you. And what's worst is that sometimes those who have a need to be seen as successful, they are prone to truly destructive behavior and addictions because they are seeking to numb the pain that comes with trying to constantly prove themselves. They're trying to quiet the fear of never accomplishing enough. Or in fatigue and desperation, they're just looking for what will feel like just a quick win. There is a dark side, a shadow side to those who need to succeed. Now, the question that I've wrestled with over the years is, where does this come from? What's the origin story for those who have this desperate need to be seen as successful underneath the surface? Where does this come from? There's a lot of theories out there about where this need to strive and succeed originates, and you might not be surprised to know that many people posit that it stems from childhood. There's some event in your very young life where you are taught, you learn that in order to survive, you need to accomplish a list of things, and in doing so, please people out here and please yourself in here. That accomplishing tasks was a means to survival and earning approval that felt good and made other people feel good. I've shared with you before about my own origin story in this regard. The story of when I was 6 years old. I was in kindergarten, standing on a stage that I didn't choose to be on. My mom signed me up for the talent show. And I was singing a song that she wrote for me. That's her right next to me playing the guitar as I sang the song, holding a Bob Barker Price is Right microphone. And I'll be honest with you, I sang that song, kindergarten talent show, and straight truth, no lie, I crushed it. I was really good. And in that moment, something happened. I looked down and I saw my mom. And this particular season of life, I think things were difficult for her for a number of reasons, but I saw her beaming after I was done singing. And I looked out and I saw classmates, some of whom had never given me the time of day. They're all applauding. And I saw teachers smiling with pride. And something in me just kind of clicked. I was like, oh, this is how life works. This is how I make everything okay. I gather a crowd, I show up, I make people smile, and they're okay and I'm okay. This is how you exist. This is how you survive, right? There's a story told about a father who writes a letter to his son. This son had just gotten into the college of his dreams. And the son was away at high school and found out that he'd gotten into the college of his dreams, wrote home and told dad, and then dad writes a letter back to the son. This is a true story, and this is a snippet of the letter that the dad wrote to his son, seemingly to congratulate his son about getting into the college of his dreams. The father's name was Lord Randolph, and this is what he wrote. He said, "Son, it is a good thing to put this business very plainly before you." In other words, he says, I'm going to shoot straight with you. Do not think that I'm going to take the trouble of writing long letters. after every folly and failure you commit and undergo. Remember, he's writing to congratulate him. I am certain that if you cannot prevent yourself from leading the idle, useless, unprofitable life you had during your school days, you will become a mere social wastrel, one of the hundreds of the public school failures, and you will degenerate into a shabby, unhappy, and futile existence. Love, Dad. The father was Lord Randolph. His son was Winston Churchill. And there are some who suggest that Churchill's drive to succeed and accomplish and to be something was connected to the fact that he never, it seems, could earn the approval and the affirmation of his father. Now, I bring this up not because if you have this need to succeed, you need to call home and be like, Mom and Dad, what did you do to me? I'm not saying that. I think it is profitable, however, to know your origin story. At what point did you start believing the lie that in order to live, you have to perform? When did you start believing the lie that in order to be somebody, you have to achieve all the things? That in order to have a life-giving amount of approval and affirmation from others, you needed to meet and exceed every mark in their eyes and yours. At what point did that become true for you? At what point did you start to believe that? I think it's good to know. Because the truth is this: approval is not bad. In fact, you were made to receive it. You were built with a hunger for approval. But the approval that you were made to be hungry for is not the approval of peers or friends or family or even of yourself as you stand in the mirror. The approval that you were made to be hungry for is the approval, the affirmation of God. We are made with a desire and a drive for a rightness that comes from God. The theological word is righteousness. Righteousness, when it's used in the scriptures as it's used in our faith, means to be approved by the divine. To be righteous is to be approved and affirmed by God. And there is a hunger in all of us to know that the one who made us looks down at us and puts the sticker upon us and says, oh, you are good. You are good. You are made for that. You need that. You can't live long without it. And that's why Jesus says at the start of his most famous sermon, Matthew chapter 5, Jesus says, blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they shall be satisfied. Jesus says it is a good thing, a godly thing to be hungry for an affirmation and approval that comes from heaven to earth to you, and to see that approval and affirmation of the divine not only flow to you, but into this world. We were made for this. And all of our attempts, whether you have a need to be successful under the surface or not, all of our attempts for affirmation and approval, they're ultimately glimmers and glimpses and hints at this ultimate need that we have. But we get all twisted and turned around, and we try to scratch that itch and satisfy that need in all these wrong ways. St. Augustine once famously said this, a quote I've used here probably 50 times if I've used it once, but it's so good. St. Augustine once famously said this, "You have made us for yourself, O Lord, and our heart is restless until it rests in you." But what he's talking about is approval from the divine. What he's talking about is righteousness, knowing that the one who made you looks down at you and says to you, "You are good, and you are mine. I see you, and I accept you. I notice you, and I approve of you." Now, this is the point where all of the achievement-obsessed people in the room start to think to themselves, "Okay, Matt, I'm smelling what you're cooking." There is an approval that is ultimate. There is an affirmation that will satisfy. And it comes from God. I've been trying to get it in all these wrong places, but it comes from God. And Jesus himself even says, you will be satisfied if you hunger for the approval that comes from on high. So, tell me, Pastor Matt, what are the checklist of things I need to do in order to get this all-satisfying approval? What do I got to do? Because I don't know if you've heard, I can crush it. Tell me what I got to do, and I will watch the TED Talks I need to watch. I will talk about it with my life coach, and I will have this done by 4 o'clock. Let me know what I need to do. I am hungry and thirsty for this righteousness. And this is where I break it to you, and this is where we finally get to our text for the day, because Paul tells us in Romans chapter 3, and this is a success-obsessed person's worst nightmare. Paul tells us there is not a single thing that any human being can ever do to get or earn the approval that every human being ultimately needs. Which makes my head, and I'm a professional Christian, I know this by heart, like it makes my head want to explode. I'm like, really? There's nothing I can do? Have you seen me work? There's probably something I can do. No, but Paul puts it plainly. Romans chapter 3, starting at verse 20. He says, by the works of the law, doing the right things in God's eyes, no human being will be justified. No human being will be justified in God's eyes. No one. He continues, but now the righteousness, the approval, and the affirmation of God has been manifested apart from performance, apart from the law. Although the law and the prophets, all the things God over throughout history said we should be doing, laid witness to it, the righteousness of God through faith in Jesus Christ for all who believe. That's it, just faith in Jesus. For there is no distinction, all have sinned, even the most successful among us, and fall short of the glory of God, even the most accomplished among us, and are justified by his grace, not as a wage that they've earned, but as a gift through the redemption that is in Christ Jesus. Do you hear that? If you are a achievement and accomplishment-oriented person, do you hear what Paul is saying? There is no path by which your performance earns you anything from God. You can be right with him, yes. You can get the shiny sticker from him, but it is not offered to you as a wage to the accomplished. It is given as a gift to those who know that they are empty and who claim nothing on their resume but Christ. That's it. And those words can be incredibly frustrating to a person who likes to hit the mark and crush the metrics. It can be incredibly frustrating, but what we have to metabolize is this truth, that making myself good is not my job. God will not be won by anyone. Making myself good is not my job. I can be good in God's eyes, but it is purely a gift through faith in Jesus Christ, whose job it truly was to make all people good. You know, for people who are performance-oriented, it can take decades for that truth to become real for you. Like you have a saving faith, but your faith is still largely intellectual, where it's like intellectually, like I know that there is nothing I can do to save myself. It's all grace. Like I know that, but like functionally, I'm still acting as if God grades on a curve. Like I live my life as if he's still measuring everything that I do, as if he's one of the countless other people that are watching everything that I try to accomplish in this life, and he's looking down from heaven and going, nice work, And how I live is that I live functionally as if I am saved by my own efforts, and that what matters is that I do the best I can, and if necessary, God will sprinkle a little bit of Jesus on top of it to just fill in some of the cracks. But what happens if you stay there too long, is that the temptation that emerges to compromise character takes over. And eventually what can happen is if you don't come to terms with the truth that it is all grace, only grace, just grace, what will happen is the temptation to compromise character will take over. And you will have to hit rock bottom before you actually understand that it's all grace. Like you will lose the job where you perform and prove yourself, or your years-long affair will be found out. Your spouse will be like, I'm tired of being married to nobody because you're working all the time. Your spouse will be done. Your spouse will leave. And you'll be at rock bottom, like laid bare as an unsuccessful, unfruitful mess of a human being. Far too often, that's what has to happen in order for this to become real. You have to be laid bare, and you have to discover that in that moment where you are nothing but a meager mess, that Jesus comes to you in that moment at rock bottom, and he kneels down next to you at rock bottom. And what you find is that Jesus meets you in that place where you are laid bare and you are nothing and you have nothing. He meets you there, and he pulls off his own sticker. And he puts it right on you. And he says, yeah, you are a mess. But apparently, I see the sticker there, you are mine. And the Father approves. And that's when transformation takes place. That's when you finally get it of like, oh, I have the acceptance and the approval of God, even though I have nothing and I am nothing, and even though my hands are empty, like I've got it. I've got it. And when that hits you, that's when transformation takes place in the lives of those who have all of this need for success underneath the surface, on the underside of their iceberg. I saw a fascinating video floating around the internet a couple of weeks ago, and it was a video of an iceberg breaking, and the bottom of the iceberg kind of coming to the surface. And when it comes to the surface, you can see just how deep the underside actually is, and how dark blue and almost purple the colors are. It's fascinating. And for me, that's a picture, as we work this metaphor throughout this series, of you. The success-oriented person, as the transformative love of God who needs nothing from you, as the transformative love of God is received into your life, the underside of the iceberg starts to melt and it starts to break away. And you have the opportunity to become truly free. And here's what freedom looks like for you. Freedom looks like this. It's knowing this truth. It is knowing that if you have the approval of God, you have less and less need for the applause of man. If you have the approval of God, you have less and less need of the praise and the approval of man. And that's freedom. And once you get to that spot, then you have the ability to show up to the relationships around you, not needing to use them as a means to get affirmation, but you're able to show up weak if you're weak. You're able to show up honest about your failures. And then if you're able, I know you try to hide all those things. I'm right there with you. But if you're willing, because you know you already have God's approval and you don't really need to hunger as much for everybody else's, you're free to show up on bad days as bad. You're free to show up on weak days as weak. You're able to admit your failures. And if you're able to do that, to show up to important relationships with honesty, then you have the opportunity to experience the most powerful thing any human being can experience. The most powerful thing that any human being can experience this side of eternity is this. It is not earning approval from others. It is not being admired by others. The most powerful thing any human being can experience is being accepted by others after you have been real with others. When you have shown up as you are, and people have stuck around and loved you anyway, that is the most satisfying, fulfilling, life-changing thing short of grace from Jesus Christ itself that a human being can experience. And that is what melts the underside of the iceberg. So, because I know you who are like me, who wrestle with this, I know you like a to-do list of things, okay? Let me give you a handful of spiritual practices to embrace that can help you lean in to the life-changing love of Jesus and continue to melt and work away that underside of the iceberg that just desperately needs affirmation from others, okay? I've got 3 things for you. You might want to write these down. The first is that you need to normalize failure. People who are all about accomplishing and success-oriented, they do not like to fail. In fact, most of us will never even attempt anything unless we're pretty certain we're going to succeed. We do not fail, certainly not publicly. But what you need to do is normalize failure. Like you need to take on a hobby that you're probably never going to be really good at. I suggest golf. You need to embrace things where your natural skills and ability, your winsomeness, your character is not going to really get you anywhere. It's just going to be hard for you and difficult for you. You also need to start taking note of the things that you do on a day-to-day basis where you don't meet the mark and sit with those things. And rather than pivot to something you're more successful at or sweep the bad thing under the rug, you need to sit with those things. I would suggest, and this is a spiritual practice, in whatever kind of devotional time or spiritual nurturing time that you have in your day, I would suggest that you open up the Notes app on your phone, and as you reflect on the previous day, you write down all the big and small things that you were bad at the day before, the mistakes that you made. Write out that list, and I know that feels awful to someone like you. But write out that list, and then after you write out that list, read through them real quickly, and then offer a simple prayer. Heavenly Father, thank you for loving me anyway. I know that seems petty, but for a person like you who tries to accomplish every goal, it is profound spiritual work. The second thing is that you need to find a confessor. You need someone who shares your faith, that you trust, that you can bare your soul to, and you can tell this person the mistakes that you made, the failures that you're experiencing, the temptations that you wrestle with. You can lay your soul bare, give them a hunting license to your life, and they can root around and they can ask questions, and you're honest with them. And this might be a fellow church member, it might be a therapist who shares your faith, or a pastor, another spiritual leader. But you need someone to whom you can confess, who can then look at you and proclaim the forgiveness of Jesus Christ over everything that you've confessed and say, you are forgiven, you walk in grace, and not only does God forgive you, but I still love you. Transformative. You need a confessor. And then the third thing you need to do is befriend stillness. I know you don't like to stand or sit still. I know. I know that for you, being still for 10 minutes, 30 minutes, an hour, oh my goodness, feels like dying. You're always crushing it and doing something. You know why it feels like dying? Because somebody is dying when you sit still. You need to let the doer die. Let the doer die by not scrolling anything, not accomplishing anything, not texting anybody, not emptying the inbox, just sitting and being still. Let the doer in you die a little bit in you, and let the human being breathe and live as you just sit still and know that even though you're still, you are still loved. Can you do that? When my wife and I were at the University of Michigan, Flint, when we were at the University of Michigan, we were season ticket holders for Michigan football. And when we were in school, Tom Brady was our quarterback at the University of Michigan. And for most of the time where Tom Brady was on the football team, he was fighting for the starting job. It was never fully or completely his. He was always in a battle for the starting job. And there was one particular game in Ann Arbor where Lisa and I were sitting next to each other, and Tom Brady was having an awful game. And we booed him off the field. We and about 100,000 other friends, but I was the loudest. We booed him off of the field. And Tom Brady would later cite that that quarterback battle as something he looked back on, as something that fueled his rage to be successful when he entered into the NFL. What I'm saying is, I helped Tom Brady become a Hall of Fame quarterback. I had a small part to play in that. 19 years ago, 2005, Tom Brady had just won his third of what would be 7 Super Bowls. He just won his third Super Bowl. He was being interviewed on 60 Minutes, and he was being asked about whether or not all of this success, 3 Super Bowls, by the age of 27, 3 Super Bowls, Super Bowl MVPs, all the awards, he'd done everything, whether or not it was satisfying for him. And Tom gave what, to me, was a heartbreaking answer. This is what he said. Why do I have 3 Super Bowl rings and still think there's something greater out there for me? Maybe a lot of people would say, hey man, this is what it is. I reached my goal, my dream. Me, I think, there's got to be more than this. This can't be what it's all cracked up to be. What else is there for me? The interviewer responded, what's the answer? And Tom said, I wish I knew. I wish I knew. Here's a man who at a young age had accomplished every professional goal 3 times. Who had been to the top of the mountain thinking that it would satisfy him, that he would get enough approval and enough affirmation, he'd silenced all of his critics, and that somehow he'd be satisfied. And he got to the top of the mountain 3 times and still said to himself, is this it? That there has got to be more. And the answer, of course, is that yes, there is. There is an approval and an acceptance and an affirmation that is more soul satisfying than even Super Bowl stardom 3 times over. There is an acceptance and an affirmation that meets the deepest needs of the human heart, but it is not given away as an award at the top of the mountain. It is not handed to the most successful. No, it grows like a flower in the valleys. And it is offered to us, not when we've accomplished it all, but when we've got nothing left at all. And it is given to us in Jesus Christ, the greatest approval, as a gift from Him. Look, if you're success-oriented, I know you are afraid of not accomplishing enough in your life. I feel it in my bones too. But hear me, perhaps the greatest fear for us should be accomplishing a whole bunch of stuff that doesn't matter. Because you can get to the top of the mountain 3 times and still say, is this all there is? You have the thunderous applause of God today. May it free you from hungering and clamoring for the temporary and trivial affirmation of man. Amen.